My personal take is that laughter is the greatest revolution ever happened on this planet. Let me explain why.
Albert Nerenberg is an award-winning filmmaker, hypnotist, and TEDx speaker.
The Oka crisis happened in Montreal, and I sat next to a major French television TV reporter. He said, if there's any way you could get that camera in behind the lines, we would hire you right away. That turned me into a filmmaker. What people perceive as barriers in life are entirely psychological. At the end of the Oka crisis, I had guns put to my chest and I thought I was going to be executed. I was powerfully traumatized. The reason that I think I got into hypnosis was because I was carrying a traumatic load, and hypnosis was so good at helping me resolve trauma.
So does that mean you do it to hypnotize yourself as well to some beliefs and to good things?
Part of me was searching for the ultimate joke. Laughter is a great unifier because...
What is that difference between humor and just laughter?
There's some big differences. One is that humor is... the laughter is...
I just want to quickly thank you for beginning to watch this podcast episode. If you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to do so. Would love it if you join our community. You'll also be up to date on the latest content, and this really helps me reach out to more guests. You can also visit our website, centerformindfulness.ca. There's free events about mindfulness and laughter. Hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have a conversation today with Albert Nerenberg. He's an award-winning filmmaker, hypnotist, TEDx speaker, and his seminal documentary, Laughology, which is really good. I actually have a DVD from way back. It helped spark the international laughter movement and has been screened and televised in countries around the world. He's also the founder of the annual American and World Laughing Championship. Would love to learn more about that. He has spoken twice at TEDx and 3 times at IdeaCity. His TEDx presentation is Hypnosis Fake. It's one of the most watched demonstrations of hypnosis of all time. He directed You Are What You Act, which was awarded the jury prize at the Illuminate Film Festival. I actually just finished watching that yesterday, and it's really, really good. He's also currently working on 2 new documentaries. One about whether dogs laugh. That would be fascinating. And another, which is anti-war film called Make Orgasms Not War. So, if you're up for thought-provoking exploration of human behavior, psychology, laughter, persuasion, then stick around. Albert, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Really, that guy sounds interesting.
That guy sounds fascinating. Well, I'll tell you what, that guy really is fascinating. And I'm curious about that guy's journey to becoming an award-winning filmmaker. What led you to even wanting to do documentaries?
That's actually a really good question because I was originally an improv guy. My story, I think, begins when I end up in Calgary, Alberta at the age of 16, at the wrong end of the oil industry. I was a gas station attendant, because the only job I could get. And I saw a poster for this theater company called Loose Moose Theater Company.
Loose Moose?
Loose Moose.
Yeah.
And not having much of a life at the time, I decided, I'll go do this. And Keith Johnstone, who is the father of modern improv, a brilliant guy who actually died recently, was teaching improv. He wrote the book on improv. The book is called Impro. And the irony of it was I would go to these workshops, and I don't think people appreciated, it was Calgary at the time, who Keith Johnstone was. I mean, really a major figure in improv worldwide. And so they would not show up. And so Keith Johnstone and I was the only guy there. We would go for dinner or go to movies and hang out. And I learned improv directly from him.
Oh, wow. What an opportunity.
I didn't appreciate it at the time. I just thought this guy's great and he's fun to be around, and I'm learning a lot. Only years later, Kids in the Hall, Second City, all these things that sort of were heavily influenced by Keith Johnstone became a big deal.
Mm.
So that's where it starts. But then the film part is even weirder. I was a guy who didn't like film. When I was in I went to McGill University. The film students to me were very pretentious, elitist, and I thought film was a kind of irrelevant medium in a weird way. And I had attitude, I think. To make a long story short, because I was in an improv troupe, I had a video camera I used to bring with me to film the shows. Then the Oka crisis happened in Montreal. I was living in Montreal, and I was working as a reporter for the Montreal Gazette when all the TV cameras were pulled out. And the day that all the cameras pulled out, there was actually panic because people felt at that time, this sounds strange, that TV was keeping things safer because both sides, the army on one side, the Mohawk warriors on the other, I won't go into, all you have to know is it was a standoff between the Mohawk warriors and the Canadian army. They both pledged not to fire the first shot, which was ultimately being policed by TV. And when the TV cameras pulled out,
the danger, TV was the peacekeeper in a way.
Weirdly, yes, because we don't think of TV that way usually, but that in this weird case, that seemed to be the reality. So I went for lunch. A bunch of us realized what happened was that the cameras got pulled out. The army had surrounded the situation, and I sat next to a major French television TV reporter who saw that I was carrying a little video camera, which I used for improv. He said, if there's any way you could get that camera in behind the lines, we would hire you right away.
Oh, wow.
And I was a bit crazy enough, and I was with my friend Robert Galbraith as a photographer. We thought, let's give it a shot. And we basically smuggled that camera through 3 kilometers of army lines. We did it by crawling very slowly through the forest, even though there were tripwires for phosphorus bombs. Phosphorus bombs won't kill you, but they will alert the army to your presence. And
you missed them? You didn't step on them, I guess.
We went so slowly, we saw each one, and then we would step over them. And to make a long story short, we got through. And I think maybe the relevant part of the story I wanted to tell you, because you might be saying, well, Albert, why do you see yourself maybe as barrier breaking or groundbreaking? And here it is. The army had surrounded the Mohawks with a 30-foot razor wire perimeter, razor wire all around. There was no way to get out. There was no way to get in. And they were very proud of the fact that nobody could get in or out. Part of the story was the Mohawk warriors were very dangerous. They needed to be contained. We arrived at the razor wire. We didn't know how we were going to go over it. We just didn't know. And then we had an idea at the last minute. We're like, wait a second. Why don't we see if we can go under it? So we just stuck our jackets under the wire. We lifted up the wire and we rolled.
Oh, wow.
And next thing we knew, we were inside the Mohawk encampment. I got hired by TVA. I got hired by American Networks, ABC, and a couple others. Suddenly I was making a ton of money, which I didn't expect. Thousands of dollars a day for danger pay because it was dangerous.
Yes.
And then I became a filmmaker because they were all like, please shoot this, please film that. And after that, there was a documentary made called Oh Canada about the experience behind the lines and how we got through. And so that turned me into a filmmaker. Before that, I was I thought filmmaking was dumb. But after that, I was actually, no, it's not dumb.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's really brought a lens to real life crisis, brought an insider's view. And I mean, it does really sound like an action movie, like what you had to go through to actually get through and safely. And there was a real element of danger too.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that too. Well, I can say here's a key part too. I think that that psychological experience of seeing what was supposed to be an impossible barrier. They had
Mm.
advertised that no one's getting in, no one's getting out. They were so sure of themselves. And then the fact that we were able to go in changed my thinking. I realized
Mm.
maybe other so-called impossible barriers are not impossible. Literally, if you check, there's a famous documentary called Gasdage, I think 270 Years of Resistance, and a B documentary. In that documentary, you see the army soldiers actually officially denying that we've gone in, because they said there's no way anyone
Huh.
could have gone in. Not possible. So I don't, I'm not saying I'm superhuman. In fact, I'm saying quite the opposite, that a lot of what people perceive as barriers in life are entirely psychological. And that was what that taught me.
It's actually a pretty deep and profound paradigm shift earlier on in your career, and really for
Yes.
anyone in life to discover, like in a, and it feels like very embodied way in your body, like, whoa, there was an actual like physical barrier I wasn't supposed to get through, and it was supposed to be kind of an impossible type of thing. And as even as you're saying it, it's making me think of, yes, what are the different barriers we think we can go beyond? What's impossible? And there's no way I can do it. I tell you something personally that has happened to me on a very small, tiny scale, which is picking up running. And I had an injury, an Achilles heel injury, a year and a half ago or so, 2 years ago. And I was like, I don't know if I'll ever be run again. Uh, and some even went to physio, went to all the different treatments, and some like, yeah, I mean, you can do 5K, 10K, but maybe you shouldn't consider the big ones. Like maybe your body's not built for it, right? But I did have some who believed in me. I said, just go for it. And I did, and I ended up
And
finishing a half. And then a week ago, I finished another half marathon. And
congratulations.
I still haven't recovered, but but it just showed me, like, it was very emotional for me. Like wow, I crossed the finish line when I thought just give up. It's easier.
That, by the way, that's fantastic. Good for you. And
Mm.
yeah, and I think you're entirely right. When I think about almost every documentary I've made,
Mm.
almost every one, like I made a documentary on stupidity.
Mm.
It was the first documentary on stupidity
Yeah.
and a feature documentary. And a lot of the key people at the beginning said to me, "There's no film here." They didn't see it. They
Mm.
just said, "What? How do you make a film about stupidity?" And almost even the laughter film at the beginning, Laughology, a lot of people were like, "It's an interesting idea, but it's not going to be a feature documentary." And so
Mm.
what you learn in life
Mm.
is there's often, I mean, I think Einstein's famously said something about you've something about people facing ferocious opposition from mediocre minds or something like that. I don't know if it's
Mm.
mediocre minds as much as people just oppose good ideas from my
Yes.
experience.
but but if you ever think too, as you're sharing, it's like having the courage to go with an idea, because not every idea will be a blockbuster in anything, like any field. And but you clearly have had the courage to just go for it and see what happens. Go for it and see what happens. And I think that's an incredible trait for success and fulfillment in life. Like you've gone for stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that is exactly, except I think it is. I think it's trial by fire. I think that
Mm.
I don't think I'm particularly more courageous than the average person. I think that
Mm.
I've had a lot of trials and I've had to go through them. I mean, it's
Mm.
funny as you started asking me this question, I just don't want to divert this too much, but I started to realize that there was a kind of continuity that never occurred to me before
Mm.
in my life that made sense, which is that at the end of the Oka crisis, I should explain to this that a lot of reporters and a lot of Mohawks got traumatized by the police. The police were very hostile at that time. This is the Sûreté de Quebec. And I had guns put to my chest. I
Mm.
was actually taken into a forest and I thought I was going to be executed.
Wow.
I wasn't the only one who had that experience, but I was like powerfully traumatized. And
Mm.
and at the time, I think that had a corrosive effect in my life. But when people ask me, okay, how does the hypnosis stuff fit in
Mm.
and everything else, I just realized now when you ask me that question, well, one thing led to another, and in my life, and it actually makes sense.
Mm.
So I don't want to rush
No,
into it, but it's
please.
kind of part of the story. Like the reason that I think I got into hypnosis
Mm.
was because I was carrying a traumatic load from my journalistic and filmmaking experiences, and hypnosis was so good at
Mm.
helping me resolve trauma. I was like, holy cow, I got to learn how to be a hypnotist
Mm.
because I have trauma, my friends have trauma. This could help the world.
Yeah. This is actually the best way to get into anything is
Is it?
experiencing it directly, truly, not in terms going through a trauma, but I mean, you experiencing something and you're doing the work. Like you went to, was it so hypnotherapy?
Yeah. So here, I'll jump ahead a little bit, but again, remember I said this is. I think I'm a bit of an opinionated person, but often I jokingly I tell my friends I'm going to write a book called "All the Things I've Been Wrong About" because I've been wrong about so many things, and I admit it. But I was wrong about film. Film is a wonderful medium,
Mm.
uh, and I was wrong about hypnosis. I didn't know. I was not somebody who's ever interested in hypnosis before I
Mm.
became a hypnotist. I'd seen stage hypnosis shows where people were turned into chickens, or
Yes. Or start barking or well, yeah.
the usual weirdness, and I was aware of stories saying there was good evidence to help people quit smoking and that
Mm.
kind of thing. But what happened to me was I did another really crazy documentary about 9/11
Mm.
uh,
Which one
shortly
is
after.
that?
It's actually was part of a series called Supernatural Investigator.
Mm.
It was about people who had dreams about 9/11 before it happened. So very, very
Wow.
weird. Yeah, I know. I was very skeptical. Again,
Mm.
this happens to me over and over in my life where I'm like, that's impossible. There's no way that's true. And then I'm like, oh, actually, might be true. And there's a lot of people who had dreams about 9/11 before it happened, told their therapist or psychologist who
Mm.
wrote it down, dated it, and it's there.
Wow.
And so we had to look. And so there's also a conference every year in America about precognitive dreaming where they demonstrate
Mm.
really weird phenomena with precognition. So, long story short, I'm working on this documentary and I have to get footage
Mm.
of how people died in 9/11 because there's a debate because some people visualize it one way, some people visualize it another. We're trying to prove that they're right or wrong. So we have to get footage of actually how people died.
Wow.
Stupidly, when you're working on a film, you're trying to get ahead of your deadlines. I got the footage and I would like watch it often alone. Like, is that the right footage that we need?
Mm.
And I saw these terrible things that
Mm.
even worse than what a lot of people saw. And some of it burnt into my brain. I was aware that, whoa, that is burned into my brain. And I would go to sleep and I would see it, and I would wake up and I would see it. And then I
Mm.
developed anxiety and
Mm.
insomnia. And I realized I was troubled simply as a direct result of watching that footage.
And rewatching, yeah. I mean, that's secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, whatever name you want to call it. The nervous system gets impacted when we watch such unimaginable, truly horrors.
I know there's a
Yeah.
debate about this, but I think you can answer the question fairly easily. I mean, there's a debate about whether you can be
Yeah.
traumatized by watching things as opposed to experiencing them. But there's no doubt to me you can be traumatized by watching things. I mean, I have clients, so many clients, weirdly enough, who come to me often because they had an older brother or older sister who made them watch like a really terrifying horror movie
Yeah.
when they were too young
Yeah.
and they got traumatized and the trauma is real.
Mm.
My story is that I knew I was traumatized. I knew I was not well,
Mm.
and I saw this ad out of the blue on the internet that said, "Do you have intrusive memories that you can't get rid of? Call this number, free consultation."
Mm.
And I wasn't the kind of person that calls those numbers, but I thought, okay, that's
Give it
me.
a
I
try. Yeah.
give it a try. And here's what happened: within half an hour, I called the guy right away. The guy was like, "Do you want to try this now?" I was like, "Sure."
Mm.
I didn't know that it was actually hypnosis. It was a process that he did.
By
But
phone, or you went?
yeah, over the phone.
Oh, yeah.
And in half an hour, the trauma that had been torturing me, like
Mm.
every day, day in and day out, disappeared. It was
Wow.
gone. I felt it disappear. That was the amazing part.
Mm.
I saw and felt it disappear. And when that happened, I realized, ooh, I
Mm.
should learn how to do this. And then when I learned how to do this, I realized, holy cow, there's way more to hypnosis than I realize, and then most people realize and still
Mm.
realize. It's a crazy, crazy kind of portal.
Mm. Well, in your TEDx, is the title is Hypnosis Fake?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I also watched that one. It's really good. I think it's like 11 something million views. Amazing. You guide everyone through it, and you really answer that question. But it's people do have misconceptions. What would you say are the biggest misconceptions?
You know, what's really weird about hypnosis is that I would say, like, people have a kind of rough idea. If you said to me, Albert, do you know how cars work? I could probably give you a rough idea how cars work.
Yeah, there's a steering wheel, there's a wheel, there's an
Yeah,
engine. Yeah.
and even if you said to me, "Do you know how surgery works?" You wouldn't want me to be your surgeon, but I could give you a kind of a rough idea. Hypnosis. What's weird about it is that people often have the opposite idea or no clue, absolutely no clue. I'll give you an interesting example. So, and this is, and in a way, science is holding things back.
Mm.
So when people go into deep trance, so this is you've people have seen stage hypnosis shows where people kind of flop over. So there's no name for this state. It's sometimes called somnambulant trance, but what's going on?
Like, looks like they just fell asleep. Boom. Is that what you mean?
That's right.
That part? Yeah,
Looks like they're sleeping, but you ask them if they hear what's going on, they can hear everything.
yeah.
They are awake. This is one of the things that I demonstrate. They're not asleep, they're awake.
Mm.
But it looks like a sleep state. So this creates complete confusion about what's going on.
Mm.
Two, it is very obvious to hypnotists that there's a parallel between REM state dreaming, because if you look, you only experience this if you put someone into trance and you're, a few feet away from them.
Mm.
You'll see their eyelids flickering back and forth,
Right.
just the same way that if you're next to somebody who's asleep and dreaming,
Mm.
it looks the same. So the reason why that TEDx exploded, I think, it's not just my entertainment value. It's because it's the first time somebody publicly made that connection, said
Mm.
REM state dreaming and hypnosis have
Mm.
strong parallels.
Mm.
And when you understand that, a whole bunch of doors open. But if you don't understand that, you're like, what?
What's
You're
going
like,
on?
how did that guy become a chicken?
Yeah. Did they pay these people to act? Right.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I guess my point is that, like, I teach people hypnosis, and I often explain to them that it's like a series of doors opening.
Mm.
That when you're outside, you can't really understand it. You have to pass through the doors.
Mm.
Sometimes you have to experience hypnosis, and it makes it different from other things in the world that you can sometimes get a sense of just by looking at them. I don't know why it's that way. I just think it is.
Mm. Well, often when we don't understand something, we fear it or push away against it or like question it even more. Not exactly like a logical thing, but we don't if you don't fully understand, even though, like you said, there's actually interesting research. I experienced it myself in my counseling career earlier on. I think it was 2002 or three. I can't remember, but it was a conference, hypnotherapy conference, and I actually volunteered to be on stage because I was a skeptic. I was like, I don't know if stuff works. You know what I mean? Like, and it was treating up, working with anxiety and depression, or like you're saying, different things and traumas. And I actually went into that like sleep-like state. Right. And I remembered everything and I was totally willing to go with it, but I wasn't acting. Like I was like, it gave me an insider perspective. Like I really, and I was slumped even more than I thought. Like I asked people, I'm like, was I completely slumped? I felt like I was, but I don't know how much. But like, yeah, you were totally down. I was like, oh, uh, but I could hear everything, and it was very safe. Like it wasn't like someone is tricking me, and I think that's some of the fear. Like, what if someone's going to program you to do bad stuff
That's
or
right.
take advantage of you? And I mean, it's fair enough. It's a fair enough.
It's a reasonable
Yeah,
fear,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, that is one of the problems that people think
Mm.
hypnotists, because in trance hypnotists appear to be demonstrating, you know, very powerful phenomena. People think that that is permanent, or for example, you can make somebody forget their name. Well, if you can make somebody forget their name, can you get them to forget that you asked them for their wallet
Yeah,
and
yeah.
forget
Give me your
it?
car keys
Yeah,
and
but the
sign
truth,
off on the transfer.
but the truth is, people will remember everything usually that they
Mm.
experience in trance. So there is,
Mm.
otherwise there would be like a crime wave, hypnotist
Yeah.
crime wave everywhere around the world,
Right.
because people would be like, "Oh, I could just use hypnosis to." It's been attempted in that there are these
Mm.
interesting stories. I think somewhere in Italy there was a guy who would go to a grocery store,
Mm.
and he knew some of the cashiers were very hypnotizable, and there was video of them like sort of zombie like pouring the cash from the register into a
Ah,
bag.
that
And
actually happened. Wow.
yeah, people do attempt these
Mm.
things, but they almost always get caught because of inconsistent results. And but you know what I was going to say about you? We see what I think is interesting is what you described is you probably can experience what's called somnambulant trance,
Mm.
which is fantastic.
Mm.
I One of the documentaries I wanted to work on, but you see, these are documentaries that you can't really make because, well,
Mm.
not yet, because TV is just so close-minded.
Mm.
I believe so. A certain part of the population is like you,
Mm.
can achieve somnambulant trance. They think it's around 30-40%.
Mm.
Isn't that strange? The 30 or
Yeah.
40% of the population can go into very deep trance
Mm.
where they can have, like, for example, I bet you could have altered states through hypnosis, meaning you could get drunk. You could probably
Mm.
experience hypnotic ayahuasca or
Mm.
hypnotic MDMA, and then you could instantly become sober. You
Wow.
can do that, but the rest of the population can't. Isn't that kind of interesting?
That's
And
amazing, actually.
yeah, it is amazing. And there's also a question about whether somebody who's not somnambulant can become somnambulant. I think you can. Like, I was a terrible hypnotic subject. I got way better. It's also in the eyes. I can show you a really interesting trick. We can actually do it right now. It's
Yeah.
fun, might as well.
Let's
So
do it.
there's a test called the Spiegel test,
Mm.
and it actually measures and is fairly reliable your ability to go into deep trance.
Mm.
And all you do, it's very simple. You just take, let's say, you take your hand,
So
you
I'll do
lift
it
up
right
your,
now.
yeah, you can do, you lift
Okay.
up your pointing finger, and you
Yeah.
put it sort of in the middle of your head while you're
Okay.
holding
So
the
finger,
headset.
middle of my head. Doesn't matter right or left hand.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
And now you want to try to look up by rolling your eyes back at your finger, where your finger is, as far, and then you want your eyes to roll back as far as possible. Let them
Okay.
roll.
So I'm rolling my eyes up.
Okay, so according to this, you actually don't pass the Spiegel test. I thought you might,
Oh.
because the look, I don't know if I can imitate it, but the look of somebody passing the Spiegel test is their eyes become entirely white.
Oh, wow.
Entirely white. Now, isn't this another weird thing? Isn't it curious that some people do this and some people don't?
Huh.
And what people will describe is they'll be like, it hurts. They'll say, if I try to roll my eyes back further, it hurts. But I think you can get past that. I think you can just practice. That's what I've learned.
Mm.
I roll my eyes back every day to get better at it.
Mm.
Because hypnotizable people, their eyes just roll back.
Interesting. So does that mean you do it to hypnotize yourself as well to some beliefs, into good things? You do
Yes.
it. Ah.
Yes. I think well, and in fact it's what meditators do. A lot, if you
Mm.
watch good meditators,
Mm.
their eyes roll up, they're kind of looking at their third eye,
Mm.
and they are giving themselves positive suggestion.
Mm.
So it's real. That part of it, I think, is real, and it's a lot like hypnosis.
Hmm. So inputting positive things and suggestions to create some positive change, like that's really, yeah. And you know, there's a couple of documentaries that you've done. They're just fascinating. I mean, all of them are, but this one leads to, you know, you are what you act. Is that the right title?
Yes, you
You are
are
what
what you
you act.
act.
And I know you did one about lithology before it. So I wonder if you can say a couple of things about that one first, lithology, in terms of what led you to making that documentary and what were your most surprising findings about laughter.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Well, I don't know if it's a straightforward story. It's actually a weird story. Um, Before I made Laughology, I was in satire, and I would get these gigs where, like, I worked for City TV and I worked for a few TV stations
Mm,
where we would do very risky comedy.
mm,
So, for example, I did these things where we would take, before this hour is 22 minutes, would do anything like this. This is where the idea actually came from for this
mm.
hour is 22 minutes.
Oh, wow.
We would take fake actors and stick them into real political situations and have them do really weird things. Like we would have, so we'd have these people, like guys wearing headsets, so they looked like undercover police, and they would protect, the prime minister. But then we would have them have a crazy love story with a reporter,
Oh.
and it made it for really crazy. But sometimes we would get detained by the RCMP because they're like, "Wait, are you guys real cops or not?" They look pretty convincing,
Mm,
and they didn't like the kind of shenanigans we were up to because obviously they had security concerns. So it was just a risky business, and I've noticed that the kind of comedy I was making was always escalating in risk. It was
mm,
getting more and more dangerous, and I started to ask myself, what am I really trying to do here?
mm,
And part of me was sort of searching for, I think, the ultimate joke.
hmm,
If I could somehow create a situation that was just so shocking and funny all at the same time, I had achieved gold.
hmm,
And in that quest, I started to ask myself, what is the deeper spiritual meaning of what I'm searching for? And
mm.
suddenly, it was actually having a kid that taught me this. When I had a daughter, what was weird about it was, not weird, but my father unfortunately died right before my daughter was born.
Oh, sorry.
But also, to make it weirder, my partner's father also died,
Mm,
actually in the middle of the pregnancy. And it kind of cast a dark cloud over this child's birth. And when the child was born, I was shocked to see after about 2 months that the child just started to laugh. I did not know until I had a kid
mm,
that laughter is innate. And still,
mm.
most people don't know this. I mean, that's the basis of laughology, that laughter is not learned, it's
Right.
not taught. It is an innate behavior that is part of every culture and civilization on the planet. And the reason that matters is that before that, anthropologists, psychologists sometimes would often
Mm,
define cultural differences. They would point out, like, one culture does this, one culture does that, as
right.
being very significant. But laughter is a great unifier because no one teaches humans to laugh.
Mm,
They just do it. It's part of our internal programming, and it happens all at the same time, roughly 2 to 3 months.
mhm. And there's no concept like a baby doesn't have a concept of a joke or construct of, oh, this is funny, ha ha ha. There's no, it's just a natural, yeah.
As one theory is that that's why we don't throw babies out the window,
Mm,
because they are jolly. They can be very jolly and so much fun. But yeah,
mm,
it bonds children, sort of babies, to their parents.
yeah.
But also that you have to ask, like, why is it there? And in fact, it is there before language. And that's why I
Mm,
think Laughology became the film that it did, because we live in a culture that is extremely dominated by language. We love language. We
mm,
think language is the source of all meaning. What the film demonstrated, or the research in the film demonstrated, was that no, laughter precedes language. Laughter
Mm.
is the first way that humans connect, not language. But somebody's even pointed out that it's actually even the domination of laughter by language is in the syntax of the way we speak.
Mm.
And a funny example of that is it's very rare that people laugh and then talk. They almost always talk and then laugh.
Wow.
So they will say things like, boy, that was a ridiculous thing you just said. But they won't say, that was ridiculous.
That's right.
That's because one theory is that laughter was subjugated by language to a certain extent.
Mm.
And so it has this sort of subordinate role.
Mm.
But laughter, one theory, is both the origin. I believe, my personal take is that laughter is the greatest revolution that ever happened on this planet.
Mm.
Let me explain why. Before you had mammals laughing, you lived in a more reptile world
Mm.
animals just did fixed action patterns. They just did the thing, the instincts that they had, bite this,
Mhm.
chase that. When laughter happened, you suddenly allowed mammals to be able to play.
Mm.
When they began to play, they developed vocalizations that were more sophisticated. In the case of humans, likely led to the development of language.
Mm.
So, but laughter is never given credit for this. Laughter is still seen as a kind of trivial
Yeah.
kind of thing, as we know.
Mm. Yeah, there's a sense of silliness and like there's a critical mind that gets in the way. I know when I first experienced laughter in a kind of group setting with laughter yoga, I was like, my critical mind was like, what are we doing here? Even though part of me like was so hungry for just laugh. But there's a critical part in us that stops us from experiencing. So that language part is saying stuff like, "What am I doing here? What are people gonna say?" Right?
Judging. That's actually one thing I really love about some new trends in laughter yoga is
Mm,
they're encouraging people to leave their judgmental mind behind, and I
mm,
found that to be quite refreshing
mm.
because laughter, that's part of what you got. If you're really gonna really laugh, you have to let go of judgment.
Yeah. So, what else did you discover in that documentary? Really, really great documentary. What else? Surprises.
So laughter has these key factors that I
Mm,
said hadn't been talked about. Well, one,
mm.
there hadn't been a film about laughter, even though people, when I tell people that, they're like, wait a second, there must have been films, must have been films about Charlie Chaplin. But I'd be like, that's humor,
Yeah.
not laughter. Many films about humor. There was none that actually said, hey, wait, look at the laughter part. So
Mm.
that's why
And what is that difference for folks who are not aware of the difference between humor and just laughter?
there's some big differences. One is that
Mm,
humor is largely an intellectual process or a brain process, while laughter is much more a embodied process. But
mm,
there's an huge evolutionary difference. Humor is likely only maybe tens of thousands of years old, while laughter is probably millions of years old, because
mm,
laughter is probably in mammals, while humor is much more of a human brain thing. But we experience them linked. That's what's confusing.
mm,
But they're very different.
mhm,
So Laughology one was demonstrated the innate that laughter is contagious and that it was innate, which is a humanizing thing, meaning it's the way that we can prove that all human beings really are the same. We
mhm.
all we all begin laughing the same. We may speak different languages. We might find different things funny, but we all laugh.
Yeah.
Two, we found out that laughter was strangely contagious in ways that were unusual. So, for example, if you and I, let's say, got angry,
Mm.
that anger is contagious. If you got angry at me, I might get angry back at you. But here's what's different: laughter actually causes body movements to synchronize. So, for
Mm.
example, if we start laughing similarly, we do something called a limbic lock, where our limbic systems kind of tuned to a similar frequency, and
Mm.
that's why people look the same. Two people who look different laugh together, they look the same. It's really weird. So that's was another thing. One is that in the film we tracked down the man with the most contagious laugh in the world, and that was part of an interesting story because what really makes his laugh contagious isn't that he's so kooky. Well, maybe he is kooky, but it's more that he's a feedback loop. And I think what that revealed was the secret of cheerfulness. That if you want to be a cheerful person, you have to be aware, you have to be willing to culture your own feedback loop yourself, that make yourself laugh and kind of laugh at your own laughter. And that is the key aspect of the cheerful personality, that we have these kind of loops inside of us. There's like a really interesting study that says that when you smile, you bias your brain to find more things to smile about. Similarly, if you laugh, you find more things to laugh about, but you've got to make that first decision.
Yeah.
There's a lot of personal responsibility there.
So it's almost like starting a little lawnmower.
Yes.
Getting it going, but we have to take that action. So there's like you're saying, responsibility, accountability of really activating something within us that's available to us. Right.
And having what I've learned over the years is I think everybody needs a laughter practice. And I think that's not well known, meaning like a lot of people have their yoga practice, meditation practice. If you want to be a cheerful person, you need a laughter practice. You got to have, like I do wolfing every morning. Wolfing is wake up laughing. So I try to laugh as early as I can in the day for no reason. And I have found it to be revolutionary because of that exact thing I mentioned before. If you laugh, you bias your brain to find more things to laugh about. So even in the morning, I wake up, I'm groggy, I'm not really excited, but I do a bit of laughing, then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, it's a funny world. And I'm more inclined to laugh more. So that was Laughology. I mean, it took me to this really crazy, a bunch of crazy experiences. One was the Tanzanian laughter epidemic, which we tried to solve the question because it was never solved. So in 1962, 35,000 people in Uganda and Tanzania started laughing, some of them for months, and did not stop. And no one's really figured out why. We thought maybe it was malarial fever, but that was ruled out. So in the film, we sort of try to figure out. I recommend you watch the film because it's there. And then I go to a laughing church too, which is also very interesting because they exalt laughter. It's a good idea to exalt laughter. Like, why not have a laughing church? But sort of laughing for Jesus. So in the process of doing that film, I learned laughter yoga. I got trained as a laughter yoga leader. And that kind of led me into the sequel. And in a way, You Are What You Act as a sequel, where I started looking at the fake it till you make it question. And I had noticed over the years, like the little articles in the paper were about Tom Cruise. And I was aware that Tom Cruise isn't somebody I don't think is necessarily a nice person. Maybe he is, but what was interesting about these articles is it said that Tom Cruise was rescuing people. And I read an article, he rescued somebody from a sinking boat. He rescued a woman who was in a hit and run. And I thought, that's weird. That's the kind of roles he plays in his movies. And then I noticed he's not the only one. Harrison Ford did similar things. Kate Winslet rescued somebody from a burning building. And I also started wondering about the dark side when Heath Ledger played this character that died over and over again. In that movie, The Dark Knight, he dies many times. And then right after that film, he died in real life. And I found out this was a pattern too. There was a famous example in England in, I think it was the 60s, of a guy on a radio show who played a guy who had a heart attack and died on the radio show. And then he had a heart attack and died in real life.
Actually did, yeah.
Yeah, and these things are not one for one. If you get cast as a guy who dies in a movie, you don't automatically die.
Yeah. It's not like every time it's a causation, it's going to happen. But
there was some pattern there that got really interesting, and I thought, I also, financing a film is not easy, and I just thought, I basically went to the network and I said, "What would you say if I got you Tom Cruise, Harrison Ford, Kate Winslet, and Jamie Foxx in one movie?" And they were like, "Oh, tell me more."
And what's the budget for this thing again?
So yeah, so that was part of what got it financed, and it got this really interesting question of how acted behavior, which is also interesting, like why we don't notice or don't know about it. Why are we unaware of dramatic behavior or theatrical behavior? I think we are a phobic. An extreme example would be like places like North Korea, where I think any kind of dramatic behavior gets you into trouble and you have to conform and disappear into the crowd. But we're like that way. We're that way too. We are not a theatrical people, even though we love theater and we love movies.
Yeah.
And we associate drama with trouble, like somebody getting thrown out of Starbucks or something.
Right, dramatic. This was dramatic.
Yeah, it's always bad. Drama is always bad. But I wanted to show that drama is good and that can work in your favor, and that you can change your world by the role that you play in life. And that people don't think about this.
Well, you know what's amazing? It's in the documentary. You really bring the science in, and I'm wondering, does this mean that how we act can affect health, whether it heals us or makes us sick?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say there's all these sort of weird examples of, well, posture is a really good example. Since making the film, I've changed my posture a lot because I would come across these little funny studies that say, for example, looking up makes you more optimistic. And it's really true. All you have to do, if you look up towards the ceiling, you'll notice you get a lilt, a light feeling. And if you look down, look between your feet, you'll notice that you feel a little bit, I don't know, sad or
Yeah, I
feel.
can feel like more like my face is frowning as I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So each of these gestures means something. And all of a sudden, all these weird things started making sense to me. Like, for example, looking far off into the distance is actually good for your health. It improves your vision. But also, when you look far into the distance, it improves executive function. You're better at understanding where your life is going, and explains why views are so valuable in real estate. Because people who have views and can look out over the city or look out over the country are actually improving their executive function, or it's a good feeling. And so all these things matter. Power posing matters. I developed something called power laughing because I thought it was funny. I thought, yeah, you can do laughter exercises. So let's say you do standard laugh, like a gradient laugh. So you start very gently, but do that in the Wonder Woman pose. It's way more powerful.
So the Wonder Woman pose is what? You put your hand on your hip and you're
On your hips.
standing? Is that?
Yeah.
Hands on your hips and standing tall.
Standing tall, shoulders out.
Yeah.
And there's objective reasons why. I mean, shoulders out improves breathing. Head held higher also improves breathing. So there's not, these poses are empowering, not because they look empowering. They do things to the body that are interesting. And I'm not sure why. Some of them I'm not sure why. But yeah, and so and it's not that I believe you should go around power posing all day, because I think that there's a role for, I jokingly call loser posing. Like if you need to apologize to somebody, you would not power pose. You not go, "Hi, I want to apologize for what I just said." It's like that. Each pose has a purpose, and I think the role of power posing is to be available when you need to assert yourself. Not that you should do it all day long. But generally, I mean, Amy Cuddy says you should power pose in your sleep. I thought that was kind of interesting. The explanation is that animals that are more confident and feel better on this planet are expansive, are expanding. animals that are troubled and sick and or afraid are shrinking or withdrawing.
Yeah.
So generally, as a rule, anything that is expansive is empowering.
Mm.
Um, and so that's kind of, it all kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
And so when I made the film, I was realized, well, that, of course, what Tom Cruise is doing is he's playing these expansive roles. He
Mm.
is moving from object to object. He's running. He is demonstrating high testosterone behavior. And what does
Mm.
testosterone do? Interestingly enough, we know about like maybe grows beards and things like that, but
Mm.
the other thing it does is it creates individualistic action, bold, higher testosterone, more inclined to be bold and individualistic.
Mm.
So if somebody gets hit by a car and they're lying there and everybody is in a freeze because they don't know what's going on, and you're Tom Cruise and you've hired testosterone and you've been here before because you saw this in a
And
movie,
you've rehearsed that and acted it.
you are more inclined to act. And
Mm.
the other thing that's even weirder is I started to think that what some people are doing very much by creating a strong narrative about who they are and what they're doing in the world and how
Mm.
they're acting in the world is they are creating a movie in which other people are bit characters. That is going on right now. We are in Donald Trump's movie, where Donald
Mm.
Trump is creating this very powerful narrative that I am persecuted by lunatics and that they're going to try to put me in jail because
Mm.
I am representing righteousness and good. And because the narrative is so compelling
Mm.
and everybody's feeding the narrative, even his enemies are feeding the narrative,
Yeah.
that we end up being bit characters in his movie.
Because he believes that movie.
Right. That's right. And that's another thing. I
Mm.
do this thing called movie therapy in hypnosis.
Hmm.
I started doing it because of making that film, where I started to realize when people were troubled in life, like let's say really troubled,
Mm.
they would come to me and they would say to me, "It's like I'm in a bad movie."
Mm.
Like it's, I would ask them to describe how they sort of see their life, usually in black and white,
Mm.
dreary, strained. And the other thing about it was that they were not usually the star of their own movies because they were
Mm.
usually jealous of other people who seem to be living well. So when you are jealous of other people,
Mm.
you're making other people the star of your movie instead of you being the star of your movie. So I started doing this style of therapy where I make people, first of all, I make people the central character in their own movie, figure out their narrative, empower their narrative, and then go. And I have
Ah,
found it to be like a really interesting system.
that's fascinating. So do you get them to write about it first? Is that
Well, we often talk about like,
talk
what
about
is your narrative? What do you want in life? And then,
Mm.
and who are you? And then power pose your way into it. Sometimes in trance. Trance
Mm.
lets you simulate things that you can't necessarily do, and then now start acting it out. And I have seen really, really weird things.
Hmm.
I'll just give you one really quick example.
Mm.
A woman who thought she was never going to find love again. She was in an abusive relationship, split up with her husband,
Mm.
but she created a movie where she really had this dream where I want to have an Airbnb. Uh, is there any? And then I'd say, well, would you do it alone? No, I want somebody to be with me. Who do you see there? Let's go into trance. She saw this guy. It was a guy with dark hair, fairly tall. And make a long story short, 2 years later, she now lives in Maine. She has an Airbnb. She met a guy who is a returning soldier from Afghanistan. He's tall and he has dark hair. Like she
Wow.
manifested. I'm like, I was freaked out. But and not everybody can do this. She's a very good at going into trance, which is part of the
Mm.
story.
Mm. You see, this documentary, you really bring the data and interesting interviews. Like you have Gabor Mate, and
Yeah,
really his
yeah,
perspective so interesting. You talk about embodied cognition,
yeah.
fascinating. Like really, it's really worth watching. Just so everyone's listening. If it's got, I'm gonna watch it again actually. So I watched it once. I'm like, oh, there's so much to digest here. So
I, when I made it, I wanted it to be empowering for people. I wanted
mm,
people to go, oh, I can use this. Like there's some really funny things that I found fascinating. Like the angle at which you look at people
Mm,
alters your perception. I mean, this is kind of obvious, but it's kind of interesting. If you look up at people,
mm,
they seem more confident and often more beautiful. If you look
mm.
down at them, they look more humble and more lost. Like the angle at which you look at people changes your emotional perception of them. There's just so many weird things like that. And um, there was like a really weird study about walking up a hill. They did a study where they had people walk up hills with a friend and walk up a hill alone.
Mm.
Guess what? When you walk up a hill with a friend, it is a much smaller hill. It's much easier. It's just this interesting way that we're distorting our reality with our behavior, with our fingers. That's the one thing I did. I mean, you might remember from the climax of the film is that these gestures change. You know,
Two
if you make
thumbs
that,
up.
yeah, you see the world in a more positive way.
Yeah,
Thumbs down.
busy.
See the world more negatively. Hey, look, we made this. Um, and so the point of that is that all these little things that we do, it's not just that we do them. We are in the business of altering our reality through
Mm,
our gestures all the time,
mm,
including smiling, laughing, and blinking.
mm,
It's another way that we alter reality.
mm. Can you say some more about that with the blinking?
Sure. So this is, I feel like we're flipping like hypnosis and laughter hypnosis and but
Yes.
when you train in hypnosis, so one of the first things you learn when you're trained to be a hypnotist is to look for hypnotic blinking.
Mm.
So when people go into trance, they start blinking in a slightly different way.
Huh.
And what you when you look for that, you support it. You say that's right or that's good. But
Mm.
I discovered that blinking. So I would like to make a whole documentary about blinking. But if I went to the network and said blinking is a movie, they would laugh me. They would laugh me out of there. But it is. Blinking is fascinating.
Mm.
I'll give you an example. We blink as we take things in. Like there's all this sort of expressive blinking. Like when somebody says something you don't believe, you actually usually go like this. You blink a few times,
Huh.
which means like you're like what?
It's like a
And
huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
like a huh kind of thing. And we also blink to understand stuff. So like, oh, blink. And this is us sort of chopping up the movie in ways that make sense. When somebody starts going into trance, they're actually the blinking is moving them into their internal movie inside their heads.
Mm.
And as they start blinking, you're usually telling them a story, like you're walking down a path
Mm.
to a beautiful, beautiful meadow. They start blinking. They are now switching from the outside movie to the inside movie.
Ah.
And blinking is part of the process by which that happens. Something I've always found fascinating, yet again, nobody investigates it. There's no
Right.
documentary about blinking because it
Yeah.
seems a
I
trivial
mean,
thing.
this is what I so appreciate, enjoy, and love about the work you do. Like these are the things that are in plain sight, but did you know what I mean? It's like, oh, that thing, but there's more to it. And what is that thing?
By the
Right?
way, that is
Yeah.
exactly, I mean, at some point somebody said to me, "You're a master of the obvious," which is not a compliment, by the way. But I was like, yeah, that's what I am. I'm a master of the obvious. And I did. Like, I made a film about stupidity, and it was like, again, hiding in plain sight. Laughter is hiding in plain sight. Blinking is hiding in plain sight. And I'd say trance is hiding in plain sight.
Mm.
Um, and so I'm trying. There's some other films I've made that are probably up there as well. And I would say acting,
Yeah.
in an everyday sense, is
Yeah.
hiding in plain sight. People are acting all the time.
Mm.
So yeah, and I that's my area. Things that are hiding in plain sight. Um,
Yeah. So, you know, all these areas that you're working in, I know you mentioned talked about laughter as well quite a bit, and you have the World Laughing Championship coming up, right?
yeah,
What is that? The World Laughing?
so that's a good question. So it's a funny story. When you make independent films, it's important that people find out about them.
Mm.
And so when I made Laughology, I thought Laughology was 70. 8 minutes, which is significant because usually feature presentations around 90, 100 minutes. So a little bit short. So I thought, I had noticed going to laughter yoga events that it was kind of funny, like that it could be funny in a competitive way. And this actually goes deeper. So I suggested for one of the premieres of, because Laughology was touring around the country, let's have a laughing contest before the show, just because it's fun. And it was so funny. The laughing contest was so funny. I started thinking, ooh. Then I went to a UFC fight. I have friends who love UFC. So the UFC is, the cage match things where
Ultimate Fighting Championship.
Ultimate Fighting Championship.
Mixed martial arts.
Before every fight, there's a standard thing they do where they they do a stare down.
Usually the day before the fight.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's seen as significant. It's seen as somehow you can score points in the fight by, intimidating your opponent. It seems to matter. But the intriguing thing for me, because I'm not so intrigued by people punching each other in the face. The intriguing thing for me was I saw a whole bunch of people crack up. And in fact, Georges St-Pierre did one where he's with a guy who was like, "I'm going to kill you," and Georges St-Pierre started laughing. But I knew that they're not laughing because the violence. They're laughing because of one of the rules of laughter. So one of the rules of laughter, and there are a few of contagious laughter, is if you take any human beings and have them make eye contact and bring them into close proximity, like think about an elevator where you squish people together. If you have them look at each other and then one person laughs, they will all laugh.
Yeah.
And it is extremely difficult to resist. And what this may show is a kind of spiritual component here. It's like as if somebody has come from above and said, these animals are a little bit vicious and nasty. What if we threw in
some laughter component?
Yeah, make them a little more fun. But it's involuntary. So what you're seeing, so when I saw one of these laughing stare downs, like it blew my mind. I was like, whoa, what you're actually seeing is the two destinies of the human race. So one is, when human beings stare at each other, it causes tension, gets aggressive. So if two aggressive men stare at each other, they will maybe fight, and that's bad. They'll hurt each other. But the other things, if two people stare at each other and one of them or both of them triggers laughter, all of a sudden now you have play. They can play around. They can and you're seeing this is the path. Either one side is violence domination, the other is laughter and play.
So laughter, other side of a coin.
That's right. Laughter, play, and language, I would say too. So this is the revolution, where laughter opened up human beings to do more than just beat each other up and dominate each other.
So you created this, and so what happens?
Sorry. So to answer your question, first contest was like, a few people showed up for the show, but then it became a bigger deal, ended up on ABC News, a bunch of like weird things. Yeah, like it was because it was funny. It was on Good Morning America, if I remember correctly. And so then we started encouraging people everywhere, because there's laughter people now everywhere in the world. And generally in the World Laughing Championship, there's usually about 15 countries, like literally. And what the game is, the way it started was who's really funny, but now the rule is who's the most contagious. You got to laugh contagiously. And that's a different thing. Contagiousness is a tricky thing. And so the person that becomes like the world champion usually has a very contagious way of laughing, and which is very entertaining and enjoyable. So it's become a real thing. Like you first you have your local laughter championship, then your American laughing championship, and then you go to the world. That's how it works.
It's like the Super Bowl of laughter.
Yeah. It's online because we don't have the money to fly people from all over the place. Maybe someday.
And this is annual, happens annually.
Happens annual. This year is June 1st.
So yeah, so listening to this in 2024, it's June 1st. If you miss it,
Next year.
2025, check it out. And people can watch as well while it's happening.
Yeah, it's like an online event.
Mm.
It costs like $20 or
Mm.
so, and it's pretty entertaining because there's so many different laughs. There's silent laugh, diabolical laugh. There's laughter duels. There's I'm trying to remember belly laugh. Like every form of laughter imaginable, we try to get in there, and it's quite a trick to sort of survive all the challenges.
That is neat. That is really neat. So, what is the best link for people to get to know about this? And I'll put it in the show notes.
It's driven by Facebook right now.
Mhm.
That's just where it is. So if you go to the World Laughing Championship on Facebook,
Mhm.
you'll find the group.
The World Laughing Championship, and I'll put it
Yeah,
in the Okay.
yeah,
So this has been so enjoyable. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. There's like
yeah,
two more
yeah,
documentaries that are coming up, and maybe we'll do a round two to cover those.
yeah.
But I wonder, can you share a little sample before we come to an end about laughter? A little sample that can guide the listeners for a minute or so, so we get to practice.
I should just mention like laughter. I think laughter is like a weird thing. Robert Provine used to. So Robert Provine wrote a famous book called Laughter about the science of laughter, and
Mm.
unfortunately he's dead now. But he would talk about how strange it is, like laughter, when you really think about it. Just like every once in a while, somebody just goes and you know makes this weird panting noise, and we all join in. I've been really concerned with the diabolical laugh. I think the diabolical laugh is like a beautiful laugh, and people love it. But I'm not sure the diabolical laugh is actually diabolical.
Mm.
So recently, we launched this thing called LaughX, which is a kind of TEDx, very short talks about weird aspects of laughter. So at the Canadian Laughter Conference, I did a LaughX where I talked about the diabolical laugh. And I wanted to show that the diabolical laugh itself has been stereotyped, but it's not actually evil.
Mm.
And the demonstration goes a bit like this, that it's just really three laughs strung together with increasing intensity.
Shall we try together
Yeah,
too?
and if we do that,
Okay.
we will experience like a fun, empowering laugh. And I'm going to suggest to you that it will sound diabolical, but it's not. So what you do is, the idea is you take a deep breath, and you can also say something
Mm.
first because you do that. So for example, you might say, "I'm going to show you the diabolical laugh is really not that diabolical." And then I would take a deep breath in, and I would go, one, and I take it in the second breath.
Yes.
And then third breath. By the way, I think that was just a very pure demonstration of the idea is that we weren't being evil. We weren't feeling, I wasn't feeling evil. It was just,
I got tears coming down.
yeah, it was just empowering.
Mm.
And that's my belief that it's an empowering laugh, not an evil laugh.
Mm. Is that part of what you do in the morning? You said the laughter. Or you just laugh generally, like how, like
Yeah.
you just laugh for a couple of minutes when you do it your own.
So
Just for listeners, if they want to try it out, laugh a couple of minutes on your own.
sure, I should explain that there's this thing first popularized by Tiffany Cottle, who's a laughter yoga person from California, and she was often noticed she was very depressed in the morning, even during days that didn't seem that bad. Like I've got a good day ahead of me. Why am I feeling dread? So she thought, well, why don't I laugh? There's like studies that show that laughter can really metabolize stress hormones. So she started like very first minute you open your eyes, you can look up wolfing, WULLFING, like wolfing, wake up laughing, and you can see her doing it. It's quite funny because she really is like first second, because none of us are very glamorous the first seconds of consciousness. I do it in the shower because I do cold shower laughing, and that's what I do. I do things that are a bit more like the diabolical laugh, and And to wrap up, like what we've talked about, it does everything that we talked about. It biases my brain I laugh in the morning without knowing why, but it biases my brain to find more things to laugh about. I spill my coffee. Like it happened to me once. I've spilled my coffee a few times in the morning. Before I'd be like, "Oh God, what an idiot I am! I can't believe I spilled my coffee."
Mm.
When I started wolfing, I would be like, "I spilled my coffee," and because now I see the ridiculousness of it,
Yeah.
and that's okay. And these deliberate acts, I think
Mm.
what we're discovering, what you and I have talked about a lot, is that what we are arriving at a time in humanity where we know stuff
Mm.
that gives us agency
Yeah.
to really improve our lives. I don't think we know everything,
Mm.
but we know some really key things. The more you smile and laugh first thing,
Mm.
the better your day is going to be.
Ah.
But there's no research on that.
Mm.
That's just what people are doing, discovering.
Mm. Well, what a beautiful way to send us off into the day. Whenever anyone is listening to this, you next tomorrow, perhaps maybe starting with a few moments of smiling, laughing. Thank you so much for bringing so much joy, Albert, to this rich conversation. And I already look forward to having you back. So, Dogs Laugh documentary and
I was laughing. Yeah,
make Orgasm Not War. What?
yeah, yeah.
Yes, would love
Amazing.
to continue this conversation.
Well,
Um,
thank you. Great questions, great insights. and great. It was great to laugh with you too.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. And also want to appreciate all the listeners and viewers for watching and listening. Thank you so much. And may your moments be filled with ease and may you be present in as many of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.